The great halls of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal and flowing metal. Representatives from 400 species sat in their designated seats, each chair built to fit their unique forms. Some breathed water, others needed methane, and a few existed as pure energy. But they all shared one thing: they paid tribute to the Council. Ambassador Zilthera moved through the halls with practiced grace. Her blue skin caught the light from the artificial suns above, and her forearms gestured as she spoke to her aide. As head of the integration department, she handled all new species that discovered faster-than-light travel. It was usually boring work. Another species has achieved interstellar flight, her aide reported, holding a datapad with 6 tentacles. They call themselves humans. From a planet named Earth in the Orion Arm. Zilthera barely looked up from her morning reports. Standard assessment? Yes, Ambassador. Small population, limited technology, recently unified government. They appear to have developed FTL drive during a global conflict. That made Zilthera pause. Most species developed space travel during peaceful times, when they had resources to spare for exploration. Developing it during war suggested either remarkable intelligence or remarkable desperation. Interesting, she said. What type of conflict? Her aide scrolled through the data. Total war involving most of their planet. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, massive casualties. They somehow achieved FTL while fighting for survival. Zilthera nodded. It explained their rapid development. Nothing motivated innovation like the fear of extinction. Still, it changed nothing. The rules were simple and had worked for 3,000 years. She walked to her office, a massive room overlooking the council chambers. On her desk sat the standard integration package, a document that had been translated into over 6,000 languages. The same document every species received when they took their first steps beyond their home system. The package contained several items. First was the welcome message, congratulating the new species on their achievement. Second was the protection guarantee, promising safety from hostile aliens and pirates. Third was the trade authorization, allowing access to galactic markets and technology exchanges. Fourth was the tribute requirement. Zilthera had sent this package 847 times during her career. The tribute was always the same: 30% of annual resource production, 10% of population for the labor corps, and complete submission to council oversight. In return, the species received protection, technology, and the right to exist. No species had ever refused. The few who tried to negotiate received a visit from the enforcement fleet. The fewer still who actually resisted became cautionary tales told throughout the galaxy. She called up the human file on her display. Earth looked pleasant enough: blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. The humans themselves were bipedal mammals, average height, no natural weapons or armor. Their technology was primitive but showed promise. They had split the atom, mapped their genome, and built basic computers. Their military capabilities were more impressive. The humans had developed weapons that could destroy their own planet several times over. They had pointed these weapons at each other for decades without using them. It showed remarkable restraint, or remarkable stupidity. Zilthera keyed in the standard tribute assessment. For a species of 8 billion with Earth's resources, the numbers were easy to calculate. 3 billion humans for the labor corps, standard resource extraction quotas, and the usual oversight protocols. She paused at one section of the report. Human psychology was listed as highly aggressive, territorial, and competitive. The analysis noted that humans had fought over 14,000 wars in their recorded history. They seemed incapable of peace for more than a few decades at a time. Fascinating, she murmured. Most species fought wars over resources or territory. Humans appeared to fight wars over ideas, religions, and concepts that had no physical form. They had concepts like honor and freedom that they valued more than life itself. The psychological profile contained several warnings. Humans showed unusual attachment to their homeworld and each other. They formed pack bonds that extended beyond family groups. They had documented cases of individuals sacrificing themselves for strangers. Most concerning was their response to authority. The report noted that humans had a long history of rebellion against oppressive governments. They seemed to prefer death to subjugation in many cases. The analyst recommended careful handling during integration. Zilthera dismissed the warnings. Every species had quirks. The Veltari were obsessed with mathematics. The Keth of our only respected strength. The Zephyrians considered lying a virtue. Humans were just another oddity to file away. She sealed the integration package and transmitted it to Earth. The humans would have 30 days to respond with their acceptance. During that time, they could ask questions, request clarification, or attempt to negotiate minor details. But the core requirements were non-negotiable. The package would arrive at their capital city through their primitive communication networks. Their leaders would read it, panic briefly, then accept reality. They would realize that resistance meant extinction, and submission meant survival. In her 3 centuries of service, Zilthara had seen every possible response. Some species begged for mercy, others tried to hide behind their star's radiation. A few attempted to flee to distant galaxies. None of it mattered. The Council's enforcement fleet contained over 10,000 ships. The Kethvar warriors alone could crack planets like eggs. The technological gap between Council forces and new species was measured in millennia. Resistance was not just futile, it was impossible. Zilthara's aide returned with more reports. The Terran package has been delivered, Ambassador. Standard 30-day response window initiated. Good, what else requires attention? The Rigel 7 quota shortfall, the Vegan merchant dispute, and War Prime Thekmor has requested a meeting about the Andorian rebellion. Zilthara sighed. The Andorians had been trouble for months. They kept sabotaging their own mining operations rather than meet their quotas. It was senseless behavior that accomplished nothing except making everyone's life difficult. Schedule the meeting for tomorrow. Send the Rigelians a reminder about consequences. Grant the Vegans their trade variants. She looked out at the council chambers where hundreds of species conducted the business of galactic civilization. They traded, negotiated, and cooperated because the alternative was chaos. The tribute system maintained order. It prevented wars, regulated resources, and ensured that dangerous species stayed under control. The humans would understand this soon enough. They would see that the galaxy was too large and dangerous for small species to survive alone. They would realize that the tribute was not theft but insurance, payment for services that kept them alive. As the day ended, Zilthara reviewed the human file one final time. Their primitive ships had barely reached their nearest star. Their weapons, while destructive, were chemical-based toys compared to Council technology. Their population was scattered across one small planet. She closed the file and prepared to leave. In 30 days, she would receive their acceptance. In 6 months, the first tribute shipments would arrive. In a year, the humans would be another line item in her reports. Just another species learning their place in the galactic order. The integration department had processed 847 species without a single failure. Species number 848 would be no different. Zilthara walked through the crystal halls toward her quarters, unaware that light years away, a species unlike any other was reading her message. She could not imagine that in 30 days her perfect record would be broken by a single word that would change the galaxy forever. The message from Earth arrived on day 29 of the response window. Zilthara was reviewing trade reports when her aide burst into her office, all 6 tentacles waving in excitement. Ambassador, the human response has arrived. Zilthara looked up from her work. Excellent. Transfer their acceptance documents to my system. I'll review their tribute schedules after lunch. Her aide's tentacles twisted in confusion. Ambassador, there are no acceptance documents. There are no schedules. There is only this. The display activated, showing a simple transmission. No elaborate documents, no official seals, no governmental letterheads. Just a single screen with text in the primitive human language, followed by a translation into Galactic Standard. The original text read, "No." The translation read, "No." Zilthara stared at the screen for several seconds. This is the complete message? Yes, Ambassador. Our linguists have confirmed the translation. The humans are declining the integration package. That's impossible. No species declines integration. They negotiate, they delay, they ask questions. They don't just refuse. Her aide pulled up the transmission data. The message came from their unified government. It's signed by someone called Secretary General Martinez. Our intelligence suggests she speaks for all human factions. Zilthara stood and paced to her window. Below, the council chambers hummed with normal activity. Representatives debated trade routes and mining rights. None of them had ever sent a message like this. Perhaps they don't understand the consequences, she said. Schedule a clarification meeting. Send them data on what happens to species that refuse integration. Already done, Ambassador. They responded with the same message. Zilthera turned back to the display. The word no seemed to mock her from the screen. In 3 centuries of service, she had never encountered anything like this. Call an emergency council session. The representatives need to see this. 2 hours later, the great chamber filled with confused voices. Representatives from 400 species had gathered to witness something unprecedented. Zilthera stood at the central podium, the human message displayed on screens throughout the hall. Fellow council members, she began, I present the first outright refusal in council history. The chamber erupted. Some representatives laughed, thinking it was a joke. Others demanded clarification. A few simply stared in disbelief. War Prime, Thekmor of the Kethvar, rose from his seat. Standing 3 meters tall with arms like tree trunks, he commanded attention whenever he spoke. This is amusing, he rumbled. What excuse do they offer? What bargaining position do they claim? None, Zilthera replied. They offer no explanation, no negotiation, no alternative. They simply refuse. The laughter died away. Representatives began to murmur among themselves. This was not just unusual, it was dangerous. If word spread that a species could simply refuse integration, others might try the same thing. Councillor Veltar of the High Court spoke next. Her species valued logic above all else, and her voice carried the weight of legal precedent. In 3,000 years of council law, this scenario has never occurred. Our legal framework assumes eventual compliance. We have no protocols for absolute refusal. Then we make new protocols, War Prime Thekmor declared. We remind these humans why every species accepts integration. We show them the fate of those who resist. Perhaps we should study them first, suggested Dr. Kivara from the Xenobiology Department. Their psychology reports show unusual patterns. They may not respond to standard pressure. The council voted to initiate deep cultural analysis while preparing enforcement options. Teams of xenobiologists and psychologists dove into every human transmission they could intercept. What they found disturbed them. Human entertainment was filled with stories of small groups defeating larger enemies. They celebrated characters who died rather than surrender. They had concepts like martyrdom and sacrifice that turned death into victory. Dr. Kivara presented her findings to the council 3 days later. Humans possess an unusual psychological trait they call spite. It's the willingness to accept personal harm in order to deny benefit to others. Most species see this as insanity. Humans see it as virtue. She displayed examples from human history. Soldiers who destroyed bridges to stop enemy advances, knowing it would trap them. Civilians who burned their own crops rather than feed invading armies. Entire cities that chose siege and starvation over surrender. They have a saying, Dr. Kivara continued, give me liberty or give me death. Most species would choose life and hope for freedom later. Humans choose death and deny their enemies any victory at all. The analysis grew darker. Humans had developed weapons that could destroy their planet and pointed them at each other for decades. They called it mutually assured destruction, the promise that any attack would result in everyone dying. Most species would see this as madness. Humans saw it as strategy. They don't just accept mutual destruction, Dr. Kivara explained. They prefer it to subjugation. Their history shows repeated examples of choosing death over slavery, poverty over tyranny, war over peace if peace requires submission. War Prime. Thekmor slammed his fist on his armrest. Enough analysis! They're primitives with delusions of strength. One enforcement fleet will cure them of these fantasies. But other council members grew nervous. The humans had unified their entire species for the first time in their history. Their response to the tribute demand had been immediate and unanimous. 8 billion individuals speaking with one voice. No. Intercepted transmissions showed Earth preparing for war. They were converting civilian infrastructure to military production. They were training soldiers and building weapons. Most disturbing of all, they were broadcasting the Council's tribute demand to their entire population. They're not hiding our message, reported Intelligence Chief Mordak. They're showing it to everyone. They're telling their people exactly what we demanded and exactly how they responded. Zilthera studied the intercepts with growing unease. Most species kept negotiations secret, allowing their governments to accept tribute while telling their people it was voluntary trade. The humans had done the opposite. They had made resistance a public commitment. This changes the dynamic, she told the council. If they surrender now, their own people will see them as cowards. They've made capitulation impossible. Good, War Prime Thekmor growled. Let them commit to destruction. It will make the example more effective. But other representatives worried about the precedent. If humans could refuse and force a military response, what would other species think? Would they start wondering why they paid tribute? Would they start asking if the Council's power was truly absolute? The debate continued for days. Some council members pushed for immediate force. Others wanted more negotiation. A few suggested offering better terms. War Prime Thekmor ended the discussion with a simple statement. The tribute system works because resistance is impossible. If we let these humans defy us, the system fails. If the system fails, the council falls. The vote was unanimous. The 47th Enforcement Fleet would be dispatched to Sol system. The humans would learn what every species learned, that the galaxy belonged to the strong, and the strong demanded tribute. As the council session ended, Zilthara returned to her office. The human message still glowed on her screen. No. Such a small word to carry such enormous consequences. In 30 days it would reshape the balance of galactic power, but sitting in her crystal tower, surrounded by 3,000 years of unbroken tradition, Zilthara could not imagine how much that single word would cost. The enforcement fleet began preparing for departure. War Prime Thekmor selected his finest warriors. The council prepared victory statements for release after the humans surrendered. None of them realized they were about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met a species that refused to move. The 47th Enforcement Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system like a storm of metal and energy. 200 ships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their weapons charged and shields raised. It was more firepower than most species saw in their entire history. War Prime Thekmor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Worldbreaker. Through the viewing ports, he could see the small yellow star that warmed the human homeworld. It looked peaceful, ordinary. Like thousands of other systems he had visited to collect tribute. Long-range sensors detect 23 human vessels, reported his tactical officer. They're arranged in defensive positions around the fourth planet. Thekmor laughed, a sound like breaking stone. 23 ships against 200. The humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. What class of vessels? Primitive designs, War Prime. Fusion drives, chemical weapons, basic shields. Our smallest frigate could destroy their entire fleet. The human ships were indeed small and crude compared to Council technology. They looked like flying scrap heaps held together with determination and desperation. Their largest vessel was barely the size of a Kethvar scout ship. Open communications with their flagship, Thekmor ordered. Let's give them one final chance to surrender. The transmission connected, showing a human female in military uniform. She had gray hair, hard eyes, and scars on her face that spoke of old battles. Her nameplate read Admiral Chen. I am War Prime Thekmor of the Galactic Council Enforcement Fleet, he announced. You have refused integration and tribute. This is your final opportunity to surrender and accept Council authority. Admiral Chen looked directly into the camera. Her voice was calm, steady, and absolutely certain. We said no. Thekmor felt a flicker of irritation. Do you understand what you face? We have 200 ships. You have 23. We have weapons that can crack planets. You have chemical rockets. We understand perfectly. Then why do you resist? Why choose destruction over survival? Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. Because some things are worth dying for. The transmission ended. Thekmor stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his crew. All ships, attack formation. Prepare to demonstrate the price of defiance. What happened next would be studied by military historians for generations. It wasn't a battle. Battles implied some chance of victory for both sides. This was an execution that went horribly wrong. The human ships didn't try to run. They didn't try to hide. They accelerated directly toward the Council fleet at maximum speed. Their primitive engines pushed beyond safe limits. They're not even trying to win, observed the tactical officer. They're just trying to hurt us. The first human ship reached the Council line and rammed directly into a Kethvar cruiser. The explosion tore both vessels apart, taking 3 nearby frigates with them. The humans had loaded their ship with nuclear warheads and detonated them on impact. Suicide attack, Thekmor snarled. Cowards' tactics. But the humans weren't finished. The second ship targeted the fleet's supply tender, ramming it while broadcasting a message. For Earth. The tender's destruction chain reacted through its cargo, taking out 2 more ships. The pattern continued. Human vessels threw themselves at Council ships with mathematical precision. Each attack was calculated to cause maximum damage to the enemy, regardless of cost to themselves. They targeted command ships, supply vessels, and communication relays. The flagship of Admiral Chen made a run directly at the Worldbreaker. Thekmore's gunners opened fire, tearing the primitive human ship apart. But the wreckage continued forward, carried by momentum and determination. Chen's ship struck the Worldbreaker's primary weapon array, disabling it. Through the flames and debris, Thekmore heard Chen's final transmission. "Tell the Council we said no." The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, all 23 human ships were destroyed. But 31 Council vessels were either destroyed or crippled. The 47th Enforcement Fleet had suffered more casualties in one engagement than in the previous century combined. Thekmore stood in his damaged command center, staring at the tactical display. Red icons marked destroyed ships. Yellow icons showed damaged vessels. The humans had taken a terrible toll for primitives with chemical rockets. War Prime, his communications officer, reported, "We're receiving transmissions from Earth. The planet's surface lit up with activity. Massive industrial complexes that hadn't existed a month ago were producing ships, weapons, and supplies. The humans were mobilizing their entire civilization for war. But it was their broadcast that chilled Thekmore to his core. They were transmitting the battle footage throughout their colonies. The message was simple and direct. Remember, Sol. Remember Admiral Chen. Remember that we said no." The humans weren't mourning their dead. They were celebrating them. They were turning defeat into victory by making it inspiration for others. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "we have a problem." "What now?" "The humans are broadcasting our battle reports to their entire species. They're not hiding that they lost. They're showing everyone how much it cost us to beat them." Thekmore realized the implications immediately. Other species would see this footage. They would see that the mighty Council fleet could be hurt by primitives with chemical weapons. They would start asking dangerous questions. "Prepare a second assault," he ordered. "We finished this properly." But his intelligence officer had more disturbing news. "War Prime, our analysts have been studying human tactics. They're not fighting to win. They're fighting to make victory too expensive for us to enjoy." The report showed human strategy in detail. Every attack had been designed for maximum psychological impact. They had targeted officers, communication arrays, and supply lines. They had broadcast everything to ensure maximum propaganda value. "They know they can't beat us," the analyst continued, "but they can make beating them cost more than it's worth. And they can inspire others to try the same thing." Thekmore's anger grew as he understood what the humans had done. They had turned their defeat into a weapon. Every destroyed human ship became a symbol of resistance. Every casualty became proof that the Council could bleed. "Order the fleet to Earth orbit," he commanded. "We end this now." But as the damaged fleet moved toward the human homeworld, Thekmore couldn't shake the feeling that something had gone wrong. They had won the battle, but victory felt hollow. The humans had achieved something that troubled him deeply. They had made the Council look weak. Back on Earth, President Martinez stood in the Situation Room, watching the approach of the Council fleet. Her military advisors looked grim, but not defeated. "Admiral Chen's sacrifice bought us time," reported General Harrison. "Our automated factories are producing ships faster than ever. We'll have 50 vessels ready in 6 hours. Not enough to stop them," Martinez replied. "No, but enough to make them pay again." Martinez nodded. The plan was simple and brutal. Earth would fall, but it would cost the Council everything they could take with them. Every ship, every soldier, every resource would be spent making conquest as expensive as possible. "Send the message to all colonies," she ordered. "If Earth falls, remember what we stood for. Remember that free people don't kneel." As War Prime Thekmore's fleet approached Earth, he realized the humans had already won something more valuable than victory. They had shown the galaxy that the Council was not invincible. They had proven that resistance was possible. The price of that lesson was about to get much higher. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Representatives arrived to find their chamber filled with reports of the impossible. A Council enforcement fleet had been bloodied by primitives with chemical weapons. Ambassador. Zilthara stood at the central podium, her forearms trembling as she read War Prime Thekmor's battle report. The numbers seemed like fiction. 31 council ships destroyed or damaged. The 47th Enforcement Fleet requesting reinforcements to subdue a single planet. This is unacceptable, declared Councillor Veltar. How does a species that hasn't mastered energy weapons inflict such casualties on our finest fleet? War Prime Thekmor's image appeared on the chamber's main display, transmitted from his damaged flagship. His usually proud demeanor showed cracks of uncertainty. They fight like animals, he reported. No, worse than animals. Animals fight to survive. Humans fight to die in ways that hurt us most. The council chamber fell silent. In 3,000 years of galactic conquest, no species had ever described warfare in such terms. Dr. Kivara from the Xenobiology department requested permission to speak. Her research team had been working around the clock to understand human psychology since the battle reports arrived. Honored Council, she began. Our initial assessment of human behavior was incomplete. We focused on their aggression and competitiveness, but we missed something crucial. She activated a display showing human historical data. Humans have a concept they call Pyrrhic victory, winning a battle at such great cost that it becomes defeat. Most species avoid such outcomes. Humans specialize in forcing them on their enemies. The display showed example after example from human history, small forces inflicting massive casualties on larger armies, defenders holding positions until death rather than retreating, entire populations choosing destruction over surrender. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartan warriors held off an army of hundreds of thousands. They all died, but their sacrifice inspired Greece to ultimate victory. At Stalingrad, humans fought for every building, every room, every staircase. The attackers technically won, but lost so many soldiers that their entire campaign collapsed. Representative Mortak from the Mining Guild spoke up. But these are historical examples. Surely modern humans are more rational. Dr. Kivara shook her head. Their recent global conflict proves otherwise. They developed weapons capable of destroying their planet and used the threat of mutual annihilation as a diplomatic tool. For decades, two human factions pointed planet-killing weapons at each other and called it peace. The implication sank in slowly. The Council was dealing with a species that had embraced mutually assured destruction as policy. They were comfortable with scenarios where everyone lost. There's more, Dr. Kivara continued. Humans have something they call spite. It's the willingness to harm yourself in order to harm your enemy. Most species see this as mental illness. Human culture celebrates it as virtue. She showed intercepted transmissions from Earth. Rather than mourning their defeat at Sol, the humans were celebrating it. They had turned Admiral Chen into a hero. Her final words, "Tell the Council we said no," had become a rallying cry broadcast throughout human space. They're not trying to win, Dr. Kivara explained. They're trying to make winning meaningless for us. Every human ship that dies takes Council vessels with it. Every battle costs us more than we gain. Intelligence Chief Mordak added his own disturbing findings. Human colonies are mobilizing at unprecedented speed. They've converted civilian infrastructure to military production. Most concerning, they're not hiding their preparations. They're broadcasting them. The display showed footage from human worlds, factories producing ships and weapons, citizens volunteering for military service, children singing songs about Admiral Chen and the Battle of Sol. They want us to see their preparations, Mordak continued. They want us to know they're ready to fight. More than that, they want other species to see. Councillor Veltar raised the question everyone was thinking. What other species? The answer came from the Intelligence Department's latest reports. 3 minor species had delayed their tribute shipments, claiming administrative difficulties. 2 more had requested renegotiation of their quotas. Most disturbing, several species were asking questions about Council military casualties and costs. The humans have done something we never anticipated, Zilthara realized. They've made resistance look possible. War Prime Thekmor's voice cut through the growing panic. Then we crush them completely. We make their destruction so total that no species will dare follow their example. At what cost? Asked Representative Quiv from the Agricultural Collective. Your reports show that subduing Earth will require significant fleet commitments. Our other enforcement operations are already strained. The mathematics were stark. The Council maintained order through the threat of overwhelming force. But force had to be available to be threatening. If too many ships were tied up fighting humans, other species might test Council resolve. Dr. Kivara presented her final, most disturbing finding. We've analyzed human reproductive rates, industrial capacity, and military doctrine. If they maintain current production levels, they can replace their losses faster than we can inflict them. The chamber erupted in disbelief. How could primitives outproduce the Galactic Empire? They've mobilized their entire civilization, she explained. Every human, every resource, every facility is dedicated to war production. They've eliminated all civilian luxuries, converted all manufacturing, and militarized their entire society in 30 days. That's impossible, protested Mortok. No species can sustain total war mobilization. Most species can't, Dr. Kivara agreed. But humans have done it before. During their global conflicts, they maintained total war economies for years. They rationed food, recycled metal, and turned entire populations into soldiers and workers. The Council began to understand the scope of the problem. They weren't fighting a normal species with normal motivations. They were fighting a civilization that had evolved in constant warfare and viewed mutual destruction as an acceptable outcome. Counselor Veltar posed the critical question. If we commit sufficient forces to destroy Earth, what happens to the rest of the galaxy? The answer was obvious but unspoken. Other species would see the Council's weakness. They would see how much it cost to maintain order. Some would begin testing boundaries, demanding concessions, or delaying tribute. There's another factor, Intelligence Chief Mordak added quietly. Human colonies are spreading throughout their local sector. If we destroy Earth, we still face dozens of human worlds. Each one is preparing to fight the same way. War Prime Thekmor slammed his fist on his command console. Then we destroy them all. We show the galaxy the price of defiance. With what fleet? Asked Veltar. Your reports indicate that each human world will cost us dozens of ships. We don't have enough vessels to fight that kind of war while maintaining order elsewhere. The horrible truth settled over the Council like a shroud. The humans had created an impossible situation. Destroying them would cost more than the Council could afford. But letting them survive would encourage others to resist. Ambassador Zilthera looked at the displays showing human space. Dozens of worlds preparing for war, millions of ships under construction, an entire species united in determination to make conquest too expensive to pursue. They've weaponized their own destruction, she whispered. The Council sat in stunned silence, finally understanding what they faced. The humans hadn't just refused tribute. They had made refusing tribute a viable strategy for others to copy. War Prime Thekmor's final report crystallized the dilemma. Honored Council, we can defeat the humans. But victory will cost us the galaxy. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Council faced a problem that couldn't be solved with overwhelming force. They had encountered a species that preferred mutual destruction to submission, and that changed everything. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, the Galactic Council faced a crisis that threatened the foundation of their 3,000-year empire. The great crystal halls that once echoed with confident declarations now buzzed with nervous whispers and emergency meetings. Ambassador, Zilthara stood before a wall-sized display showing the current state of galactic affairs. Red indicators marked trouble spots throughout Council space. Yellow warnings highlighted delayed tribute shipments. Most disturbing were the green dots, worlds that had stopped communicating entirely. Report, she ordered her aide. The tentacled being consulted his data pad with obvious distress. Tribute collection is down 37% galaxy-wide. 18 species have requested quota reductions. 6 worlds have declared independence. And the humans... He paused, struggling with the implications of his next words. The humans have begun raiding tribute shipments. Zilthara turned from the display, her forearms gesturing in frustration. Impossible. War Prime Thekmor reported their fleet destroyed at Sol. They built new ships, Ambassador. Dozens of them. But they're not fighting like before. The aide activated tactical displays showing recent engagement reports. Human ships had struck tribute convoys in 3 different sectors. But these weren't suicide attacks like the Battle of Sol. These were carefully planned raids that achieved specific objectives. They hit the Vegan supply convoy and stole medical equipment, the aide reported. Then they broadcast the theft throughout the sector, claiming they were redistributing tribute taxes. The Vegans have since declared neutrality and stopped paying tribute entirely. More reports followed. Human raiders had destroyed a shipment of rare metals from Rigel 7, but left a message claiming the cargo was returned to sender. They had captured a council communication relay and used it to broadcast footage of tribute collection operations to nearby systems. They're not trying to win territory, Zilthera realized. They're trying to win hearts and minds. The strategy was brilliant and terrifying. Instead of attacking council worlds directly, the humans were exposing the tribute system's brutality to other species. They were showing oppressed populations that resistance was possible. War Prime Thekmor's image appeared on the chamber's communication system. His once proud bearing showed signs of strain. Behind him, the bridge of his flagship displayed damage from multiple engagements. "Ambassador, we have a problem," he reported. "The humans aren't fighting fair." "Explain." "They've learned our patrol routes, our communication protocols, our supply schedules. They attack when we're weakest, disappear when we respond, and leave propaganda behind for other species to find." Thekmor's tactical display showed the scope of human operations. They had established hidden bases throughout 3 sectors. Their ships used hit-and-run tactics that made them nearly impossible to corner. Worse, they were sharing their knowledge with other species. "The Andorians have adopted human tactics," Thekmor continued. "They're sabotaging their own mining operations while claiming equipment failures. The Centauri Collective has declared their tribute payments voluntary contributions and reduced them by half. Each report was worse than the last. The Rigelians had formed an armed merchant marine to protect their trade routes from council taxation. The Zephyrians were demanding representation in council proceedings in exchange for continued tribute. The Veltari had submitted a legal challenge questioning the constitutional basis of the tribute system. How many enforcement fleets are currently engaged in combat operations? Zilthera asked. Thekmor consulted his reports. 17 fleets are fighting active rebellions. 23 more are dealing with civil unrest. We have 9 fleets available for tribute collection across 400 systems. The mathematics were devastating. The council had built their empire on the assumption that resistance was impossible. But the humans had proven that resistance was merely expensive. Other species were now calculating whether the cost of fighting exceeded the cost of tribute. Intelligence Chief Mordak joined the communication with even worse news. "We've intercepted human transmissions to their colonies. They're not planning to defeat us militarily. They're planning to bankrupt us." The human strategy was elegant in its simplicity. Every council ship destroyed had to be replaced. Every battle fought consumed resources. Every world that required occupation tied up fleets that could have been collecting tribute elsewhere. They've calculated that defending their freedom costs less than paying tribute, Mordak explained. And they're sharing those calculations with everyone. Zilthera reviewed the economic projections. The numbers painted a grim picture. The council's military expenditures had tripled while tribute collection had fallen by a third. At current rates, the empire would be financially unsustainable within 2 years. What does War Prime Thekmor recommend? The Kethvar warrior's response was immediate, but lacked his usual confidence. Total war. Commit every ship, every soldier, every weapon to crushing human space completely. Make their destruction so absolute that no species will dare follow their example. And the cost? 80% of our fleet commitment for an estimated 2 years. Possible loss of tribute from 30 to 40 worlds during the campaign. Significant casualties among council forces. The silence that followed spoke volumes. The cure would destroy the patient. Committing such resources to fight the humans would leave the rest of the galaxy undefended. The tribute system would collapse not from human victory, but from council absence. Counselor Veltar had prepared alternative projections. If we negotiate with the humans, we might reach an acceptable compromise. Limited autonomy in exchange for modified tribute requirements. Absolutely not, Thekmor declared. The moment we negotiate with rebels, every species in the galaxy will demand the same treatment. Zilthera understood the dilemma perfectly. The council couldn't afford to fight the humans, but they couldn't afford to negotiate with them either. The Empire was trapped between impossible choices. Dr. Kavara's xenobiology team had prepared their final report on human psychology. The findings offered no comfort. Humans view this conflict as existential, she reported. They're not fighting for better tribute terms or increased autonomy. They're fighting for the right to exist as a free species. Compromise is not in their vocabulary. The report detailed human preparations for a prolonged conflict. They had decentralized their government, distributed their manufacturing, and prepared their population for decades of warfare. Most disturbing, they had calculated the exact cost of destroying their civilization and were prepared to inflict that cost on the Council. They've made their own extinction prohibitively expensive, Dr. Kivara concluded. As reports continued to flow in from across the galaxy, the scope of the human achievement became clear. They had accomplished something no species had ever attempted. They had made defying the Council a profitable strategy. The final blow came from the economics department. Chief Analyst Yevroon presented projections that silenced the chamber completely. At current rates of military expenditure and tribute loss, the Council treasury will be depleted in 18 months. We can choose to fight the humans and go bankrupt, or negotiate with them and face galaxy-wide rebellion. Ambassador Zilthera looked around the chamber at representatives who had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia. For the first time in their history, they faced an enemy they couldn't defeat and couldn't afford to fight. There is a third option, she said quietly. The chamber fell silent as she voiced the unthinkable. We could accept human independence and modify our tribute system to prevent future rebellions, offer limited autonomy to species that meet certain criteria, reform the system before it collapses entirely. War Prime Thekmor's roar of outrage echoed through the chamber. You speak of surrender, of abandoning 3,000 years of galactic order. I speak of survival, Zilthera replied. The humans have shown every species in the galaxy that we can be defeated. We can adapt to that reality or be destroyed by it. The vote that followed split the Council more deeply than any decision in their history. Half voted for total war against human space. Half voted for negotiation and reform. The tie-breaking vote fell to the Council chairman, an ancient being who had witnessed the rise of the Galactic Empire. For 3,000 years, he said slowly, we have ruled through fear. But these humans have shown the galaxy something we never wanted them to see, that we can bleed, that we can lose, that we can be forced to choose between victory and survival. He paused, considering the weight of his decision. Send a delegation to Earth, offer them negotiation without preconditions, and prepare reform proposals for the tribute system. The chamber erupted in shock and argument. War Prime Thekmor resigned his position in protest. Several representatives walked out entirely. Others demanded new votes and emergency sessions, but the decision was made. For the first time in galactic history, the Council would negotiate with a species that had refused tribute. As Zilthera prepared the message to Earth, she reflected on how one word had changed everything. The humans had said no, and forced the galaxy to find a new way forward. The message was simple. The Galactic Council requests negotiation regarding the status of human space. We await your response.